regular Derrick. That's me. Regular. I'm just regular Derrick. I want to be extreme, amazing. S- Steve, someone's saying no sound. Steve, you're muted.
Now I'm not muted.
Steve is muted. Derrick is not muted.
There you go. Sorry.
Okay.
Welcome everybody to Co-op. Apologize for that. Apparently, did some updates and they decided to get rid of my source. So
isn't that great? Isn't it great when OBS does updates?
You don't need to hear me. It's fine. But okay. Anyway, welcome to Co-op Guild. This is our live chat talking about various board game topics. So, like I said, we've got a regular here. It's Derrick.
Hello,
Derrick.
hello, everyone. Hello.
So, but we also have Emil here. So, Emil's been a previous guest. How's it going,
guys.
Emil? You're designer of Rogue Angels.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me drop by as well.
Of course, always like having you on. So, yeah, we're talking about this is a topic I've been kind of planning to cover for a while now, and of course, you know, it's probably about time to discuss it. It's a major talking point here. But we're going to be talking about the tariffs today. So, and the impact of board game community and industry as a whole. So, disclaimer though, we will not be engaging in political questions and discussions of this. Personally, I like diving into that, but I do not want that as part of this channel. I always want this channel to be focused on board games and stuff like that. So, like, yeah, separating out that political side to just talk about the impact of board games here. Also, this can get heated, so we'll be taking questions live, of course, but please keep any interactions respectful, and it would be cool. Just, you know, we don't have to agree on everything, but as long as we're respectful, that's all I ask. So, all right, just putting it out there to start. So I think we'll be fine though. So, okay. Yeah, let's just dive into it because Remy's got the first one to talk about is what's a tariff? Because let's do the thing. So I guess the easiest way to talk about tariff is it's an import tax a country places on a specific good. That's probably the simplest way to put it. There's a lot of nuance around it and stuff like that, but that's what we're talking about here. And I guess if you're not, I mean, I think everyone's familiar with what's going on right now, but don't know. There's a major right now. The value's changing, but major tariffs being placed on import goods from China into the U.S. Right, and why that's significant to the board game space is because a lot of board games are produced in China due to the costs and their capabilities and stuff like that. So this is going to affect the board game industry in a number of different ways, and that's why the three of us are going to dive into that and try to answer any questions and kind of explore the space together. So. Yes, and the module here, thank you, Matt, to help with things too. So yeah. Okay. So let's dive into it. So that's kind of what tariffs are. There was one question I asked for questions to be submitted early. And I think this is probably a good one to start. And this was by some anonymous, which is fine. It says, will tariffs impact our hobby? I think it's a good starting point. So I think the answer is an easy yes. So I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts that other than yes, for sure, that there's going to be an impact to our hobby here.
I think it's a lot more like it's very nuanced, right?
Yeah.
Yes, it will. At the end of the day, the answer is yes, no matter what. But when I think about it, and please feel free to jump in, you too, and at any time you feel I'm not hitting the mark or missing the point, but when we talk about tariffs, and a lot of people say, well, it's an import tax on specific goods.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? I think a lot of the examples that you see out there is around the auto industry, right? So without it, let's say that another country that is importing cars in here for sale, sells it at a cheaper rate, which means the ones that are manufactured in the country that it's in doesn't get bought as much because people want to save money and they're buying the cheaper car. So if they put a tariff on that vehicle that is being imported in, that causes the manufacturer in the other country to that causes the manufacturer in that other country to have to pay more towards the government to be able to import their car in. And at the end of the day, it means that when that car is being sold, it's going to be sold for more. usually what you look for is this, like, it may be sold for more money than the domestic based car. So therefore, you get this balancing act of manipulating that market and doing that, and it also drives where that other country will then invest in the infrastructure of the domestic country and build infrastructure there to be able to produce cars as well in the country, supplying jobs and whatnot. So
Mm.
you'll see that as a lot of the example around what that is. So when we talk about tariffs on board gaming, it fall you know, instead of automobile, click in click in board game. And I think the thing is though that with board gaming, it's a little it's vastly different than the automobile industry because it's a very niche industry. And because of that, the manufacturing of that stuff is not widely available, right? It's not like um it's not like you can mass produce like how China mass produces in
Mm.
any other country in the world. And it's not saying, oh, we can't. It's more the infrastructure isn't set up to be done. And that infrastructure isn't a fly by night thing to build up. It takes years to build that up.
Right.
Right. So if you're like, well, we could just produce it ourselves, it's going to take a very long time and a lot of money to do that. And then on top of that, the you look at the nuances of labor laws that says um that you the labor laws that are here are not the same that are over there. So it will cost more to even get that game produced, which making the game even more expensive. So it becomes very tricky. But I just wanted to
Well,
kind of touch base on
Mm.
let's talk about a tariff and let's talk about kind of how it impacts the board game space.
yeah, with the
Go ahead.
factory side of things, they estimations could be easily like when we talk about time wise, easy 5-10 years,
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah.
Like it's significant. Real quick, I think this is Matt has a good comment here. So just to be clear, the tariff is paid at customs by the business receiving the goods, which is correct. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Correct.
Yep.
Mhm.
So just a quick clarification. So when it crosses that border, at that point, that's when the tariffs will
Yes.
be paid.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's tariffs is also a protection. It's a
Mhm.
protection again, for domestic manufacturers and stuff. So it makes sense that it exists and it has a purpose, and therefore it you can easily argue that you would want to have different tariffs and different
Mhm.
industries and different objects and
Sure.
different countries. We are just in a very particular situation where we have been outsourcing for too long, too much, that there is not even the know-how on a scale that it is in China when it comes to
Right.
board gaming.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, and just to circle in on that, when I did my quoting and tried to get different companies to quote my board game Rogue Angels for production, I went to Poland and the US for quotes, and both of them folded. Like they said, this is the box is too big, and it's too complex. The labor is too expensive. It will not work out.
That's something I wanted to
So
dive in a little bit more, Emil, because I've heard that from other sources as well, where it's not just the materials itself, but the complexity of it. Because nowadays there's a lot of board games out there that have unique approach to games, some little spin that gets people excited about it, right? And these unique components or approaches to games, not everyone's able to produce that, right? And so, if we were to relocate or try to redistribute where we're getting these board games manufactured, is that going to limit the, for lack of a better word, innovation that is being seen in some of these board game productions?
that's a great question. I mean, usually diversifying is a good way to get some innovation in
Hmm.
because people want to get the edge on each other. Like, okay, those over there in that country, they do it like this, but if we do it like this, then we can reduce the labor we put into it, or we can reduce the amount of printed things we do, or whatever. So I would say normally it would be positive to have a more diverse input in production to foster innovation.
Right. Yeah, it's one of those things I've been thinking about. So I've seen a lot of questions on this, and so I kind of maybe want to dive into it
Yeah,
right
yeah, let's
now.
do it.
Is I want to talk through some of the scenarios, because I've heard a lot of places that like cards are something that can be produced easily elsewhere, but maybe other components aren't. And I saw that recently with Ashes. Actually, Ashes is a real big game that Derrick and I love this game, and I saw recently that they have a new approach where you can basically you can create a deck online, click a button buy, and they send the deck to you. And this new approach is actually being done by a different factory than what they used to produce the cards in the past. And this new factory is not in China, so the good news is it's avoiding the massive tariffs in that sense. But that is just cards, right? Um, but there are quality differences. Like I've seen pictures between their new factory and the original factory. You can see a little bit of it. It's very, very close. It looks really good. I've seen other quality differences. For example, Lord of the Rings, Living Card Game from Fantasy Flight. At one point, they did PODs, print on demands. They had their own printer to use, and those quality differences were much more substantial. You can definitely tell. If I hold up the regular distribution card versus their POD card, you can really tell the difference in the thickness and everything, quality. So there's gonna be differences there. But I guess Emil, from your standpoint, are cards, is that a safe bet that that can be relocated elsewhere for the most part, in your experience?
Yeah, I would say that's the one that differs the least in terms of price point stuff. Because if you get to a certain volume and there's no labor involved in it, then it's just a matter of how long the machine is going to run, right?
Mm,
So it's what scales the worst for compared to China is the labor. So whenever you put in, and I could see that on my quotes because I also got from Germany, and when I've been printing in Serbia before that, and the thing is, as soon as you need human hands on doing something, put something together, that's where the price spikes the
mm,
most.
gotcha.
And then it's all about, there's a whole political debate about why that is, and
Right.
that's not for us to the
Yeah,
tiny board game industry to think about, but it's just a fact,
Yeah.
yeah,
fact of life.
So,
yeah, and I think that's true, right? That when it comes, I think that's the thing that you both said some stuff separately that needs to be considered in the whole, right? The skill level and the technique of doing these things is not something every company's picked up. So where Steve said, "Hey, you can see the difference in the card quality and the card things. Is that good or bad? Is that something we get to used to? Sure, but the point is that you see the difference, right? It's not a one for one shift. And then from your perspective, Emil, where you said that there's also outside of the political part of the discussion, but there is a financial part of it when it comes to labor, right? The cost, you get a number for that labor cost, and you see that number wildly shift up and down based on the country that you choose to do it in.
sure.
And you have to assume that a lot of people go to China because that number is down, right? For whatever reasons they want to do it, that's outside the scope of this discussion. It's still just more, there is a cost attributed to this thing that people have to look at, right? You
Yeah.
don't when you get your game or when you back your game on crowdfunding, you don't want to say, okay, well, um, you know, I don't care where it's printed. I'll pay $1,000. You don't. A lot of people don't have that discretionary income to just freely throw that out there. They have to be smart with their money because it's in a limited supply. So you too are looking for the cheaper price and the cheaper deal of things. So it's
Mm.
just something to consider when we talk, because I've seen people throw things out like, well, we could just print it anywhere, and it's not true, right? That's not that's not proper thinking. It's just more, if you ask yourself, well, why can't we print it anywhere? Then you'll start doing your research to see why it ends up here, right? And
Mm.
then you'll be like, oh yeah, all right, well, the technique, the infrastructure, the machines, everything, it's already set up in mass.
Right.
And it would
Mm.
take us years to do that, and
Many
the cost and
years.
expense of it will be ridiculous to even get it to that level. Um, so it's just, there's a lot of nuance to this, and that's why we're trying to navigate it very carefully as we talk about it.
So, Emil, I want to dive into your talking point or your point you mentioned about when you put hands on, that's when it gets more complex and drives up the cost of producing board games. So cards are pretty easy, right? What is the in your experience? What is the aspect of producing a board game that has the most hands-on element to it?
That's the type I do. That's the thing is usually that goes for a lot of the games we love here, and on your channel in particular, campaign games, right?
Hmm.
You have games where you need stuff inside stuff, and you need something unwrapped, or you need something. That's where there's a lot of labor involved. Most of the things, if you just printed it out and needed somebody to do like this with it, yeah, that's manageable. um, I had like a half a year where I discussed with Ludofact how to streamline the production of Rogue Angels, because I wanted to see if I could make it in Europe. And it was always about, can we just leave these things out and then players will sort them themselves, and can we just do this and that? And that was the so as soon as you need somebody to open up an envelope, put something in, or need to sort in a specific way, all those things need to split decks in a certain way. Um, that's where it gets pricey. So you can find a lot of games with a lot of components that doesn't necessarily mean they have a lot of labor involved. It depends on how the components are laid out and structured in.
Interesting. Are there particular components that are harder to manage than others, like minis or custom dice from that standpoint, or is it mostly the same from that standpoint? It's more of the well, there's two factors here, right? There's the capability of manufacturing, right, from the factory itself, and then there's the labor cost on top of it. So, like from the labor cost, dice, minis, all that stuff doesn't really matter. It's more of like how it's packaged in the box that really drives that cost. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, that's one of the the very expensive points in a production. Of course, everything that involves steel molds and custom print, where you have, because you also have a lot of hours put into creating those molds, and molds have to be maintained and be exchanged, and the material they are made in is also significantly more expensive in countries that have to import steel and have to import all the other things. So when you have somewhere like China where they have everything locally, and
Hmm.
even if they do outsource, they outsource to a company that is within the 20 miles. It doesn't really matter, right? But if others have
Yeah.
the many companies in EU, they outsource the heavy elements still to China, even though they do a lot of the things themselves, right?
Right,
So
right.
Yeah, there was a I think it was Game Trays with Forsaken that put out a pretty interesting update where they talked about that, where it was when people think of, okay, well, they're making this board game. I think a lot of people thought it's okay. Well, we've got everything we need, so we do and we produce it all ourselves. And what you just said is true: is that they don't. They get pieces from other places, and that places within 10 miles or in another country. There's a difference, and there's a difference in cost. Oh, they
yeah.
said
Oh, hold
they.
on.
And in Europe, we have been very good at.
Oh, did I cut out? Uh-oh. Let me see if it's me. Let me see if it's me. It's always me.
Derrick always does a lot of stupid stuff with mic dies. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Because I hear you and I see it on my end. Oh, it's back now. Okay, so who knows what's going on? Okay, sorry about that.
Keep going.
I didn't touch anything. I don't think Derrick touched anything. Who knows? Oh, now I don't hear you. So you're
Yeah, you
cutting
will
in
need
and out.
to change something again.
Yeah.
Nothing, huh?
Oh,
I hear
there
you
you
now.
are.
I hear you.
Okay. It's like I have to after I reset my mic, I have to reset my
Where's
mic
the
at
audio
video.
manufactured?
Where Where is this audio manufactured?
They're censoring Derrick. That's right. Illuminati confirmed. Yes. Oh yeah. Guess it's the
I don't
day of
know
the
how much
audio.
I don't know how much they heard, and I don't know what I
I don't
left
think you
off
heard anything
on.
because I think when you went on mute for a second, came back. I don't
Oh,
think I
okay.
think that's
I
what.
talked about how Emil was correct in terms of another thing people think about is that when someone says, okay, well, your board game is produced by this, that everything is done in one place, everything is every part, every piece, everything is sitting on a shelf in this one place, and it's not.
Mhm. Right.
They have to, they may have to, and I was saying that Game Trays on their Forsaken update really dove into that to say it's not something that's sitting on a shelf waiting to just be pulled off. They may have to get a part from someplace else, and there is a price cost for whether it is 10 miles down the road, which for most time it is, since a lot of that manufacturing is there, or if it's in another country and you have to get it shipped over. There's a time scale, there's pricing, there's a lot of things that go on with that. So I think that's one of the things to keep in mind when you're like, well, why is it, going up? Why is it this? Because if we choose to do it someplace else, then we also have to incur that cost of getting those parts that we need, those specific pieces and bits shipped from someplace else, which is an added cost and time.
Yeah,
Right.
agreed.
Let's see. So we talked about the miniatures. Oh, actually, let's talk about the factory side a little bit. So we talked about how card games can or generally can be produced elsewhere. Miniatures and dice, are those primarily in China, or can you get them anywhere? Or what's your experiences with that, Emil, when looking at various factory sources for those components?
There are specialized companies here and there.
Hmm.
I remember I got quotes from Italy. I think there was a dice company, and they are specialized in dice, right? So that's what they do with plastic molding. So you can find it but again, and that's Derrick's point, was that it's so many places that it would still require, that you get it sent somewhere where it's assembled. But also in EU, we have been quite good at outsourcing everything that is CO2 heavy to China, in order to get our CO2 neutral companies, which means that, you know, it is primarily done in China because that's where all the plastic is done, right?
Mhm.
So there are a few who can do, and I have not researched the entire market, and many people can prove me wrong, of course, but the majority is there.
Yeah, Steve, there has been like a bunch of question asked in the chat. So do you want to wait until the end to run through those, or do you want to run through the
Yeah,
ones that we have
well, I
here?
want to get through that topic now, but
Okay, okay.
let's,
Yep,
which
yep.
I think we just
Just checking
did.
the structure. Yeah.
So yeah, let's jump into something. So there's some really good questions here.
Yeah,
One
there's a
from
lot of
Raphael.
questions that came up in the chat.
Yeah, Raphael's a good one. How is manufacturing set up in China? How does their manufacturing zones help them maintain that competitive edge? Is that That's a good question. I have no idea.
Well, I have a roundabout answer for that question.
Okay.
And I think Emil, you could probably talk to it a little bit as well, because you're in it, right? And it's just more. Well, how is it set up to a competitive edge? We touched on labor costs. It's cheaper labor wise to produce in China than it is in another country, right? Um, it's like, how do they complete their competitive edge? You don't have to lose time and shipping on parts that you need to assemble with, because let's say, and I'm just going to throw out a hypothetical as well. Let's say that the factory that produces one part, the factory that produces another, and the factory that produces another are within hours of each other instead of days travel and flight and shipping and taxes and all that. So it's okay, you go around, you get the quote, they put these things together, and then you get this one flat rate that says using these companies you get this. So the competitive edge is you pay less because things are co-located. And
Mm.
because that industry has been set up for years, as we said earlier, and it's they've been doing this for a very long time. They didn't start this yesterday,
Mm.
and I know I'm being facetious there, but they've been doing it for a long time. That it's kind of like they move like a well-oiled machine in terms of getting that stuff done, so you don't have to pay for a lot more. Emil, do you agree, disagree with that?
Yeah, no, that's true, and we also have to, and Tim had a comment on that, is that we have to understand that uh, China does not run as we run our countries, which means there are some different aspects with how the government control the manufacturing going on, and I have no insights to that on a legal or on a practical level, but they do not run it as we do, which means they can mitigate the way competitiveness works inside China and towards the outside, right? So
Right.
they have control over it and has been able to refine it over many years, because the more they get from us, the more they have in order to scale their entire machine to work, as you said, as a well-oiled
Yeah,
machine, right?
yeah.
So that's the reality. Yeah.
Can't. So what other questions do? Or Steve, I don't.
No, good.
You wrote
Calling
this. I
out.
don't. Let's see. There is. I know Remy had this one where he said like, I have a really hard time believing that people will accept to pay a little more for everyday stuff, not just board gaming. Well, we'll stay in board gaming, but I will say the trend of where I am located has heavily swayed to people just accepting stuff. And I used examples when I talked to Emil and Steve before about where I've seen this with like where I have personally seen people just accept stuff and just say, well, this is just the way it is, and just keep rolling with it and say, "Well, we gotta pay more, we gotta pay more," and they do it, right? And the initial begrudgingness of it of, "Well, why?" And then eventually it's just, "This is just what we have to do. This is it. Stop bellying about it." And I've seen that happen more times than not to know that I'm pretty confident, especially in an industry, a luxury industry, which is what this is. I
Correct.
mean, let's be real. This is an industry of luxury, right? You don't you don't need a board game to live. so so
Yeah, Emil, yeah.
except for Rogue Angels, except for Rogue
Yeah,
Angels. You
yeah.
need
I
Rogue
mean,
Angels to live.
you will live
But
better. Yeah.
it's an industry of luxury. And
Yes.
so because it's an industry of luxury, people will pay more. I mean, they will. And I think the thing that people wonder is how much more will they have to pay, and that's the thing that drives a lot of the uncertainty. Um, it's
Hmm.
it's we don't know how much where this will end and how much it will be. So it's okay. Well, how much more will we have to pay? I'm already paying. I mean, if I look at my Marvel United stuff, right? I'm already paying a lot for specific games in this luxury hobby that we're going for. Then
Hmm.
some people might say, okay, well, if this is the marketing side coming out because I watched a whole video on marketing and how the marketing engine is to get people to buy stuff, which is very interesting, by the way. But um, they'll market it in a way that you'll be like, oh, okay, you'll
Hmm.
and you will or you won't, right? Or you'll say, nope, I got 30 games on not on my shelf that I haven't gotten yet, so I'll take a break from it. But by and large, if my data points of the historical things that I have perceived with my own eyes, people will pay more, and
Hmm.
Yeah.
they'll just say that's how it is.
That's how the movie industry runs along, right? I
Mhm.
mean, today it costs a board game to go to watch
Yeah.
a movie.
Yeah.
And it didn't used to.
Yeah.
You hear Quentin Tarantino bring this up every time he's interviewed, that back in the days, movie theaters was for everyone, and now, I mean, they have priced out the lowest income people, right? Like, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Like when I think the example that someone showed me on marketing to market on how marketing manipulates was about movie popcorn. Like
Oh yeah.
it was like where they had the small and they had the large and they said, "Okay, well the small is 99 cents and the large is 3.99." And you're like, "Well, that's stupid expensive. I'm just going to buy the small." So they introduce a medium that is that is 2.99, and then they just say for $1 more you can get the large, and you end up doing it.
Hmm.
Like
Mm,
where
yeah.
before where you wouldn't do that, now you are because you're like, "Oh, I'm making a savings because I'm paying $1 more for a large," when they got you to do what they wanted you to do anyway. And I think that
All in
example,
pledges.
yeah, all in pledges, right? That's a perfect
Wow.
example of
You don't fall for
and
those,
so
do it? Oh. All the
and
time.
so an all-in pledge is another example of that, but it's interesting how you're like, "No, I'm making that decision," and you're like, "No, you're not." You're being manipulated by marketing to make that decision. You just feel like you're doing
Mm, yeah.
it.
Oh man. Not all in blood. Did you take that back?
So,
uh,
I mean, like I said, we're swinging this and keeping it at the board game space, but
yeah, for
All In
sure.
Pledges is a good example of that for
Yeah, for
sure.
sure. There's another question you can
Canon
jump into.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jen has here. Does bringing product in from a lower tariff country stave off the import costs outside of time costs? So this leads into
Country of origin.
yeah, country of origin. So there's some tricks you can do depending on how things are worked to reduce costs. So one thing I want to call out to make sure everyone understands is for tariffs there is, like Emil said, there's a country of origin that's associated with it. And so that is wherever the thing comes from. If you get from China, it goes to Europe, it stays there for a year, who knows what. Doesn't matter. It's still the country of origin is still China, right? And until it gets to its ultimate destination. Um, so there's really no way to get around that aspect of it. Um, but what Emil mentioned earlier is kind of one of the workarounds that other companies have done. Is if you are able to bring pieces of product into a space, into a country, and then do something transformative around it that changes the product in a different way. Well, now that country it's in that made that transformation is now the new country of origin, and then that could be shipped across. So there's a way where if you were to, for example, just throwing an example, if you brought in some stuff from China to Mexico, maybe the Mexico to U.S. tariffs are a lot smaller, and then you're able to do something transformative there, and then bring it to U.S. And then overall that cost would be reduced. You'd still pay, of course, the tariffs from China to Mexico, and then Mexico to U.S. But that sum is probably less, or could be less than China directly to U.S. For example. Um, and then the other thing that has happened, just in general for other companies, is what's called the H what's it, HTS, I believe is the acronym for it, which is Harmonized Tariff Schedule. It's a code. So basically, everything you bring in has a code, and it basically says, "Hey, what category is it in? What component is it? What's its use be used in?" It basically is a way to categorize all these different products and goods that come from all over the place, and then that is what determines what tariff is assigned to it. So it won't matter for what we're talking about in our current situation because these are across the board tariff, right? It's not on specific elements. But if you were able to say, okay, actually this uh, aluminum isn't going to be used for a car, it's going to be used for something else, and there's a big tax on cars, for example, maybe that way that aluminum isn't as expensive than it could have been. So there's a couple ways around it, I guess. But yeah, it gets real interesting how that works. So
But you and one thing you have to, and one thing I'm
oh, HCC,
considering, and
thank you, Kim.
other publishers always consider is that the more links you put into a supply chain, the higher the risk of
Yeah,
something something. like, the more countries you put into a pipeline, the more risk of suddenly some country is in a civil war or has another dispute or something. So just like now there's a high risk on this America China, there's always been a high risk if you put a lot of links into your supply chain, right? So that was actually what was minimum in the beginning, was that, if we bring everything inside China, right, then the risk of things going on there, because it's a stable country, is minimized. But now you kind of have to open that can of worms and be like, okay, what if we import from this and this, and we take this, and then you suddenly need a project manager, someone to keep track on everything, and then the cost will rise regardless of how many detours you take, right? So yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Mhm.
Like the more things you put into it, the more complicated it gets, the more expensive it gets.
Yeah.
Well, on top of that too, if product is being s- stored in this place, you've got storage costs, right? On top of that,
Mm,
right? This is
Yeah.
it all adds up, and so like you're kind of playing this game of like, well, if all these additional costs, which weren't part of my calculation, is this going to come up less or more than just biting the bullet? Who knows, right? There's a lot of
yeah.
factors here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Raphael asked a question for Emil, which was, can Emil share what the process to get a game manufactured from a publisher side of things? What is the process? How do you get the code to determine what services you will contract to get the game done?
Uh, You could, I mean, most manufacturers already have a wish list of what you should provide them if you want a proper quote on something. So, or if you're just routine enough, you have your own, set of elements that you want to send to the manufacturer and say, here are the conditions, here are the prices I'm looking for, here are the specifications, down to every single bit of information you can provide. And so that's always the first step. And then they run it through their departments, and then you get prices on the individuals, or maybe just on the total sum of the games. That depends on the approach. And from there, you can then pinpoint where are the different price spikes and stuff, or how does it differ from other manufacturers. So I would ask around 10 manufacturers when I don't know exactly which one to go with, and then from those 10, I would maybe get down to four, 3 or 4, and then those would get a more substantial quote request, and then you can kind of figure out from there which one you would go with, right? And there's always a gambling aspect to it when you go to use a manufacturer for the first time. That's why many are also very hesitant to this move away from, like, publishers want to stay with those they have good experiences with, which, many of those in China, of course. Um, so it's not just jumping to an American company, even if it was there, because you also need the trust and everything that follows, right? Um, so it's a long, time-consuming process, a lot of details, and it can easily take 2 months to get just a quote. So yeah, there's a lot more to that, but
Yeah.
Long
No,
process.
yeah, that's a good explanation. Steve, I know we had some submitted questions from the form that you
Yeah,
put out, so we can go through those if you want.
yeah, we could do some. I was just looking at those. One question submitted by Jan was: Is print and play a viable strategy?
Yeah, zero overhead.
I mean, yeah, yes, you still need to get like the whatever you're going to print on, right? The card and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean,
Well, but that's up to you, right? Like
exactly.
I said, there's zero overhead. There's no there. If I said if I create a game and I say back this game and I
Mhm.
send you the STL files and the print files and everything for you to print it all, then I just get my money for my time.
Right.
I don't have to worry about manufacturing. That's your problem. So it's a viable option. It works. I think that people who have people who are able to find, and I think that's the thing I struggle with when I do P&P, is that you have to find the places where you can get the stuff printed. A lot of people say, "Well, I'll just go to FedEx and get it printed." There's a cost associated with that.
Yeah.
I'll send it off to, if you're in the US, the game crafters to print it. There's a cost associated, a pretty significant cost associated with game crafters. So it's just, yes, it's a viable option. Um, it's just more the work and the labor is on you instead of on the publisher or developer.
Yeah. And there's probably a little bit of a misconception about the print and play, because I have a lot of print and play backers also and stuff, and it's not my experience, or at least my impression, that these people are poor or anything, because the time you have to put into such a project is quite significant.
Yeah.
It's not because it's more of a lifestyle choice than it's a matter of, weighing in price.
Mhm. Okay. No, that's fair. That's
Hmm.
fair.
Yeah. So
I see a good question from Snow here that would be fun to address. So, with the US being basically the biggest board game market, now affected by tariffs, and most of the knowledge being in China, are you more worried about forgeries? Something we haven't talked about on this channel yet is for the forgeries, and there's quite a few of them out there. That's
I think the simpler a game, the more forgeries.
mm-hmm.
So it it will probably never be a thing for my game. But for simple card games like Love Letter or Azul or something, forgeries will be there, because it's such an easy product to copy and then get out somewhere else. But if it will be a bigger problem, I don't see it as it will impact tariffs, or it has been impacted by tariffs. But I don't know.
Yeah, well, I'll have to see what that is. Yeah, there's some pretty elaborate forgeries. I had a buddy of mine that was one of my local gaming buddies. He wound up getting a, I can't remember what game it was. It was one of the what I consider an evergreen game, something like, I don't know, it was Wingspan or something different than that. But yeah, he got it real cheap, and yep, it definitely was a forgery. So but it was convincing from the
Oh,
outset.
wow. Yeah.
So they're out there for sure. Um, all right, let me jump to another question I was submitted. This one is also about Jan. I think we kind of addressed this, but let's address it more directly. So, what options do publishers have to cope with tariffs? We talked about a little bit, like you could potentially like move to a different spot. We've talked about the factories, for example. Um, I've seen from the products I'm following, right? The gambit of it. I've seen it like, yep, we're gonna charge more, right? I've seen others like, nope, we're good. We've got a place we can produce it elsewhere. We're fine. Other ones are like, nope, we're going to put this on hold. We're not going to ship it out until things settle down. Because honestly, that is another thing we haven't talked about. Is not just the tariff shit now. It's also just the uncertainty things, because it changes every 3 days. It feels like so
And
makes
and
it really
the
hard
and
to
the
plan.
hardest, yeah, and the hardest hit right now are the people with games on the water. Because they don't know, right? They don't know what when my game arrives at port, how much am I expected to pay?
Yeah.
And I think that, is it going to be a ton? Is it gonna be not that much? And how does that impact, and that's a major thing, and that's a major scary point for them, because
Hmm.
it's how much am I going to have to pay? I can't afford that. This isn't an industry, even though this is an industry of luxury, this isn't an industry of luxury that I'm a billionaire because my crowdfunding campaign was successful. So that means that then I have to go back to the people who put their trust in me and say, I need more money or you can't get your game. Right. And so, and that's hard. And it's not hard from a pride thing. I think it's hard because it's like we had everything set. We had the trust of the backers, for those companies who were like, we said we'd get them this stuff for this cost. Everything was going according to plan, and then this happened. So the people who have games on the water are probably in I don't want to say panic mode, but not feeling good, because they just don't know what's going to happen when that ship hits port.
Yeah.
No. And even if they are in the right about whatever might be, you need people, experts, lawyers, or otherwise, to drive such a case forward if you were to refute any sort of tariff. And that could be viable. I mean, if your boat is on the water, it's like, okay, I should be treated as if that boat had just left, like that it left with the rules and it arrives with the same rules, right? That should be. But even if you want to refute such matters, you need money in order to do such
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
Correct.
You need money to pursue legal. Yeah.
So
there's a song called Cash Rules Everything Around Me. And that is the hardest truth ever.
yeah,
So
yeah. So I guess I guess at this point we just don't know what options that different publishers are going to be able to leverage to deal with this at this point, because it's just so fluctuating. We've
yeah.
listed a few of them, right, that are potentials, but I think everyone's going to have to make their own call what makes more sense for their product and where it's coming from. It's really a hard thing to talk about from a generic standpoint.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. I think the best thing I think what this does, it's just kind of a wake up call to start the consideration of other options.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think at this junction, that's all it really is.
for
While
sure.
everyone waits for to see what happens.
Yeah.
So
There is
another
a
question was submitted. I think I
vulnerability.
want to dive into this a little bit more.
Yeah.
Is This was also submitted by Jan. It says, do publishers have to resort to charging non-U.S. buyers to support U.S. ones? And so, my personal opinion, and I'm curious to hear what you guys are thinking, but I feel like this is kind of the equivalent of that, in the sense that,
Yes.
like, I mean, that is also a tax, right? And so, my personal opinion is if it's affecting the U.S. buyers should be the ones paying that tariff cost, not pushing across the board. But I guess Derrick, you already said yes. I'm guessing you're in agreement with that as well.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it should, whatever this turns out to be, it's going to be the U.S. version of that, right?
Yeah,
It's going to be that extra cost added on when you pay for shipping,
but just for U.S. buyers, right?
but just for U.S. buyers.
Yeah,
I don't think the rest of the world should have to shoulder this. If those if and usually, and Emil, you'll probably have to help me with this one because I don't know this full side of it, but usually when games are shipped, I don't think everything goes on one ship, right? And then that one ship touches every port. I think it goes on different ships. And so if that's the case and there's a ship bound for the Americas, um, then north, central, and south, then at the multiple ships or the three ships that are bound for the Americas, then it will it will it will those will, wherever those are headed, that will be incurred for the volume that's being done, not for I don't think the rest of the world should have to deal with
Hmm.
or pay
No.
or whatnot. It just may be if we want our gaming at the people in the United States of America have to pay more.
and that kind of.
I mean,
Go ahead, Mio. Sorry.
um, there's so many, and it ties to the previous questions about what should publishers actually do about all this, right? And there's so many avenues and so many adjustments you can make, and you will definitely see publishers try different approaches during the next how long it takes to solve this, right? It could be something like maybe the Chinese manufacturer will make agreements with some publishers about dividing their invoices differently, so that, let's say, you want to make 3,000 copies or 10,000 copies, and then you say, well, the 5,000 are going to the EU. Can you put all the upfront cost on this bill and divide it to the number of games you need? And then all the ones going to the US, if that's the other 5,000, they will not have the upfront cost, the cost you pay in order to start production, right?
Mm.
And I mean, I don't want to go into the legal aspects of it at all, but there could be some ways to make sure that the average price of a game is higher when it goes into EU, and therefore you have lower tariffs. But that's all mitigated within the publishers' calculations and not something that affects the final price necessarily. But then they just have a smaller margin on some in the EU and then a bigger margin for the US, whatever they might mitigate it with. Or they might ask manufacturers to, in the future, provide some of their bill as a service, so it doesn't reflect on a product being transferred, because you have manual work taking place in the beginning where it's like almost like a service, right? And the manufacturer, of course, normally puts all those labor costs they have in the beginning, administration, all these things into the price of individual game, right? And that's what you are then invoiced. But what if it was invoiced, some of it as a service to the company that they then don't import? That's just a service they pay, and then they import a game with a little lower cost per unit, right?
Mm.
Just it's examples, and I have no idea how things will pan out. I have an idea that publishers will try. Many abuse.
That's interesting. So the other thing I was curious about, and this might be a question for Emil, but like, this is definitely going to impact the U.S. marketplace, right? And the U.S. markets for board games is significant, right? A significant portion of sales, right? Does this effect have a chance to ripple to non-U.S. markets? Is there a way that this tariff impact to the U.S. market will then cause someone in Europe to feel some types of effects from it?
I mean, when you sell fewer games, you have to somehow adjust for that.
Mm-hmm.
And for my point, it's I think America is between 40 and 50% of my audience and market there. So if I were to sell significantly fewer games, I would have to adjust in some ways. So, and that would be very indirectly. So they would maybe feel a difference. When it comes to Kickstarters, a lot of your numbers are somewhat imaginary. Like, I mean, because you are yourself and maybe you have a companion, but then you just need to make it work. So it will not be as impactful on Kickstarter, I think, because we have ways to mitigate within it, because we are the entire ecosystem of our economy, right? Where when you also have distributors and retailers, then you're only part of it, which means then the ripple effect will have to, go down the river.
Mm.
So it may have some effect, but
and that's a good point. That you're like, no, we're our own ecosystem. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. What's the next question on there?
Let's keep going. We got some other questions to go through. Let's see. Yeah, here's a question that I think a lot of people are going to approach. Jan asks this, but was decrease your pledging due to this tariff stuff? And I think for a lot of people, they probably have a set budget to back games, and then that budget, whatever number it is, isn't going to change for people. But ultimately, that is going to translate into less overall games because the games are going to get more expensive. Whether they are paying the tariffs or manufacturing in different locations, both those situations result in more expensive games, right?
It will result in more expensive games, and I still think it won't change. I'm going to be real. Like I said,
okay.
I think there was. I mean, there'll be a lot of people who initially won't back as much, right? Initially, they'll say, "This is too high." Initially, I'm not going to. That's too expensive. That's something. But human behavior, per my, like I said, per my experience, I'll just go with per my experience, human behavior has proven that's not the case. I don't think so. I think initially, and then
well,
that FOMO monster is gonna get everyone.
Yep, we got some direct fact here. It says if Derrick posted less videos, I would pledge less. There you go. What budget, Kristen?
Yeah, I think someone said earlier, I can't remember who, it's up in the comments somewhere, but I think it was Mike. I think Gladys Dice and the Pip said it. It was more what I get for my money will change, but that isn't going to stop me. That isn't going to stop people from spending their money on crowdfunding. I think it was Mike that said that, but I believe that is true. Like, um,
Yeah.
are a lot of people going to back the we've got 1,000 minis for you in this board game? Probably not. But I don't think that company will be making 1,000 minis. I think they'll make less, but you'll still get, it will just evolve to match that market rate.
Yeah, and there is definitely an argument to be made about right now. Yeah, there's a huge decline, of course, because people are like, we'll just wait.
Yeah.
And then it will normalize because that's
Yes.
how things are.
Yeah.
And I also think you have to consider that the Kickstarter, for its innovation and everything else that's been going on, has also peaked, which means that and you cannot peak and then just flatline. It will decrease, and this is just a another uppercut it gets, right? That
Yeah.
will make it decline more, but maybe
It'll
something
rise.
will
Yeah, it'll
rebound.
sine wave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Another question. I think we can answer this from Matt. He said, should board game companies make tariffs and line item costs like shipping? I think you kind of covered that already, Emil, though.
Yeah.
It'll be baked in, though. You probably won't be...
It'll be baked into shipping.
Yeah, it won't be customer facing, but it sounds like that is...
Like that is...
yeah.
Right.
In European countries.
Yeah,
and
it'll be
definitely separating those, and people have done it for a long time, right? But having, okay, this is the cost, and this is the presumed shipping, VAT, tariff, whatever cost, and those will be charged later, because when you have a development time that is 1 year, 1.5 years, it's too dangerous to have things charged upfront. It's just simply too dangerous.
Yeah.
That's where success can actually kill a company, right? Because if you've had too much initial success, that might actually sink you at a point if you have charged everything.
Yeah. Another question we had submitted earlier was, do you think tariffs will have more of an impact on crowdfunding or retail, and why? It was submitted by Brian.
More of an impact on crowdfunding? Go ahead, Emil.
Yeah, it depends on what impact is, right? Negative, positive. I mean, crowdfunding has run its course, like I said, with the innovation and all. And maybe it will be revived now in some sense. Maybe there is more positive arguments to be made for crowdfunding in that sense, or at least for risk-averse publishers, which many are when they live on low margins and all that. But I would say since the ripple effect of going to distributors, retailers, and all that, it must be higher. The impact must be higher on regular publishers. I would say that's my presumption.
Yeah, and Annie's Shelf actually put something that I agree with. Stretch pay will be extremely important around these times, no matter how it turns out. And truly, it may be that the company still makes 1,000 minis. It's just people start using stretch pay now instead of just kind of dumping all their money at once because of the increased cost. So, Annie, you're right.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a tough one to tackle there. So another question from Remy. He asked this question earlier about how likely is it that a crowdfunded game that has been funded and is ready for production gets intentionally delayed before production in the hope that tariffs will eventually go away, that the creator will avoid having to charge extra, or holding the U.S. copies in a different country warehouse? I think we kind of covered that a little bit earlier, but I want to make sure we address that directly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very likely. Very likely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the sensible thing to do. And of course, there's no reason to keep, European backers from waiting, and also because if you're afraid of a ripple effect, maybe it's good to just get this out when you can. So of course, storing somewhere is also expensive, but yeah, that makes sense. And if you are in production, we may see in 1 year or something that we'll get some insanely well produced games because they just had these 2-3 months extra development because everyone was like, let's just keep developing a little more, like no rush, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they had some questions in chat too. I'm just looking for the word question.
Yeah, Tim has it here. So, should
Okay.
companies charge the tariffs at crowdfunding time or when it delivers?
Say that again, sorry.
Should companies charge the tariffs at crowdfunding time or when it delivers? I feel like when it delivers is probably the safest bet because that's when it
Like
really
that, yeah.
matters, right?
When it's time to ship after it's together, I assume that's what you mean
Well,
when it's baked into shipping.
yeah. Well, like when you actually complete your shipping costs, because right now
Yeah.
I feel like there's like three stages of payments for crowdfunding now, where the initial campaign, the pledge manager, and then the shipping costs at the end, right? Not
Yeah.
every publisher approaches it this way, but I see that frequently in a lot of them, right? And I think if that last step, that shipping price at the very end, I think that's the
Yeah.
safest bet.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, I agree with
even before all this happened, the shipping costs would vary a lot. And then, what the publisher's like, well, how do I deal with this? What do I do? Do I charge people more? If you just save it to the very end, that's the correct number. You don't have to worry about it at that point.
Yeah.
It's already,
Yeah.
clicked
And
over,
that's
right?
usually in the pledge manager when you pay the shipping because they know at that point. Yeah.
I mean, there was really COVID showcased the vulnerability, right? Because that was where the shipping prices just skyrocketed, and people were like, "Oh, we already charge shipping. Like, what are we going to do?"
Right.
So, yeah.
Sure. Let's
Yeah.
see. I think we covered all the submitted questions, so thank you guys for that. See anything other question we have? Let's see. I think we've covered a lot of stuff here.
Yeah, we talked about a lot.
So
Yeah, the big thing I'll say while you're looking that over, the big thing I'll say for people is there's a lot of people feeling a lot of panic right now. I think we gotta look through that. Yes, it's good to feel that emotion and do it, but in a constructive way, right? Make sure that for me, when I first heard of this, I was like, oh, indie devs are in trouble. And then as I thought about it, and then I had conversations about it, I was like, oh, that's not true. And I think that's the thing that we have to get to is that to just kind of walk through the facts. And that's what we tried to do here today is just kind of walk through some of the facts of things and how they work and what that potentially could mean. We're not saying, hey, this is what's going to happen. It's more from the data that we're looking at. This seems likely, but it can change at the drop of a hat. We don't know. But looking at it from those perspectives, I think that's the way we want people to look at it. And I'm not going to say the developer, but I told them earlier there was a developer, a publisher that I saw put in one of their things like the most outlandish worst case scenario. And I was like, that wasn't necessary. I think that will drive panic at what it is. Instead of doing that, a better constructive way would just be like, here's how this stuff lays out. Here is how this could impact us. Here is how, and here are some potential scenarios. And then we're still leaving that open to get that knowledge and go through. And I think that's the way that we have to approach it, right? One way or another, tariffs are going to be a thing, right? They have been even before you were born, so they're going to be a thing. And how we approach and how we deal with that is important to see kind of how will it impact this industry going forward, how it impacts your spending habits in this industry, and how it just impacts overall the community and how we can come together on that stuff. So that's where I just want to caution, like when a lot of people are throwing out the doom and gloom, just kind of, I don't say block it, but just try to filter through the facts
Mm.
out of that stuff and then
Yeah.
see exactly what's being said and how that impact's going to come across. And I think from there you'll find your path or what you feel like you need to do for
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah, I'm gonna echo that because that's kind of the whole purpose why I wanted to have this chat in the first place. Because I saw a lot of comments and like on both ends of the spectrum, like it's gonna be fine, no big deal, and it's gonna be horrible, and the board game industry is being destroyed or whatever. Like there's a lot of like extremes going out there, and a lot of speculation that kind of builds itself, maybe a little bit of misinformation from that side of the spectrum, and kind of wanted to sit down with the three of us, kind of look at it from a, I don't know, calm, relax, and like look at what we do know, what we can say, right, and
Yeah.
help everyone kind of sort through
The stuff.
the stuff, right, because there's a lot out there, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
Yeah.
and that's another reason why I was really happy to have Emil join us, because Derek and I could talk about the stuff, but like having someone with Emil who's very open and honest with this, which I
And
really
he's
really
in it.
appreciate. And I
Yeah, and he's
saw,
in it.
mm,
yeah,
Yeah.
Gladys mentioned this. Just your insight in this was super valuable to everyone watching. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I want to definitely echo what Derrick is saying there, because I think just the privilege I have for actually working on this, as that's my job, is like that's so overprivileged. Like from like I mean, so even if I had to scale back and be like, okay, I will have to do part-time or maybe go and find a job, it's not the end of the world if that were ever to happen, right? Or
sure.
that in general we're talking about us on the top 5% of the world talking about something that will have so little impact when it comes to the industry, overall for our lives, right? That as long as we can get together in a small and friendly communities, which this is, in general, that will it will prevail. And another positive thing that is that since there is not as much money in board gaming, experiences are shared wide with everyone. Where if you look at the computer game or film businesses, they keep their secrets close because they are worth a lot of money. Here we can afford to share, which means that we usually get out of things easier. And it's also board games were one of those industries that pioneered on Kickstarter, like really shaped Kickstarter into what it is, right? Which means it could happen again.
Mhm.
And
Sure.
there are many innovative people who will find ways around these challenges.
Yeah.
I did want to kind of wrap up with one last thing from a near short term approach that I saw mentioned from one particular publisher, and I kind of would like to see this proliferated for other publishers. So, being I'm in the U.S., and if we want to get in a state where EU copies are being sent and then US copies are being held for a bit, right? Which is totally fine, no problem there. But from a content creation standpoint, looking for doing videos, they said, hey, by the way, if any reviewers want to pay this extra cost to get it shipped to you early and eat that tariff cost, right? So that we as content creators can get the game and then be able to have enough time to create those videos to help supplement people in the EU or where they're getting to help them learn the game or ask for rules or stuff like that. That's something that I would be willing to do, and I hope other publishers are willing to offer that as a service. Because
Mm.
I've had comments in the past where like, oh, this is great stuff, but it's too little, too late, right? I needed this when I got my game because I needed help then and not later, right? So that's I don't know if you've seen that, Derek. I've had any thoughts about that.
I think usually because of the game, some of the games I play are new, but there's some games I play that are not. One of the games I'm playing now, it's 2 years old,
Hmm?
but my thing is, it's more I don't. I haven't gotten any comments like that. I think the comments I get is like when it is a newer game like Dragon Eclipse, people are like, "Oh, I can't wait for my game to arrive. I can't watch this because I got to wait for my game to arrive." And so to me, I find that if I'm doing something older, people actually join in because they're like, "Oh, I didn't take that path," and they want to see what the different path was,
Sure,
and
sure.
that's about it.
Yeah, it depends. Most of it is like if people are using your videos to learn a game, that's where it becomes
Hmm.
important,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Yeah, I haven't gotten any comments like that. I don't recall. I don't recall that I've gotten any comments like that.
Mm,
Usually
fair.
people are like, "Oh, I didn't." It's either A, you got this wrong, which is yeah, or or B, it's oh, I didn't know I played that wrong.
Sure,
And
sure,
I think
sure.
those are probably the comments that I usually get.
Excellent. Okay, well, I think this kind of wraps up our discussion. I want to personally thank both Emil and Derrick, and honestly the chat and everybody. Honestly, I was going to this, I was a little worried, to say the least, to say I don't want to bring into a whole political discussion and get people like any disrespectful comments being thrown out there. I didn't see any. Zero. So this community is awesome. All the people are great. And thank you so much for putting my mind at ease coming to such a potentially sensitive topic. So I really, really appreciate that. Um, cool. All right. That's being said, let's do some wrap up stuff. So, um, Emil, where can people find you?
Yeah, the best way is probably just to search for Rogue Angels if they want, and then they will find Sun Tzu Games, and then I'm there somewhere in that. So yeah, it is the easiest. I have both the Kickstarter thing and the game found, which is still running. And yeah, I'm just chipping away at it, and I always welcome people to come to the Discord and get a playthrough, or always have much fun with that. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely check out his Discord. It's very active. It's a great
Yeah.
community out there. So,
Mhm.
Derrick, what do you got coming up?
Uh now you see
Are you playing? You gotta
it's
play
like
less
I was
games.
ready. I was ready, then my brain blanked.
Well, you gotta
Um
play less games so people buy less stuff. So you got
There we
that?
go. There we go. I am going to tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to be playing Chronicles of Druidgore live. I'm going to be doing a side quest live, and then I'll go back to doing recording for the rest of the stuff. But I want to play through it all. I like it. I think it's fun. Then next week is Marvel United Megaverse campaign crossover with you and Kim, and I don't know what else. Oh, Aeon's End. We're in Legacy of Gravehold on Thursday.
Nice.
But whatever else is coming, I don't know what I'll be playing Tuesday night, but something. What do you got coming, Steve?
I feel like doing a random stream. So you will see a random stream at some point this weekend. Not sure exactly when. So I'll give you guys a few hard notice, just FYI. I I haven't scheduled it yet because I'm doing a playtest with a different designer. So I want to make sure I prioritize that first before I do this random play test play. So I think I'm going to be playing Street Masters because I feel like I
Cool.
just want to play it. So Monday, of course, is Marvel, and then Wednesday we'll be doing another game stream. I got some of them in the cube. I'm not sure which one I'll pick yet.
Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed.
We will be doing that full campaign because we love that one. So I'm not sure we do that yet, or if we jump to a different one because we do have One Hit Heroes. I want to cover that as well.
Oh,
That's a
cool.
quick,
Cool,
easy
cool.
one to cover. So
Mhm.
we'll see.
Mhm.
All right, I think that's all we got. Like I said, thank you so much, Emil, for
Yeah.
joining
Emil,
us.
you're
Thank
amazing.
you. Well, thank you. It's always so nice to be here. It's such a pleasure being on your channel. So.
Yep, of course. Thank you. And go check out Rogue Angels if you guys haven't seen it. We've got plenty of videos on both Kanji Studios and here Co-op Guild and on Me Bed Table too, because we covered this game a lot. We all love it. All love it. Great game. All right. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you next time at the Guild. Bye bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.